addiction, prevention, recovery.
Welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast. I'm Dominick.
And I'm Jillian.
Welcome to our show today. We're going to be talking about health issues in recovery, dealing with health issues. If anybody notices my voice is a little raspy, Jillian, I was with some friends last night playing volleyball. I hadn't played volleyball in I don't know how long, years. And, of course, we were screaming and yelling and cheering and whatnot. So if I'm a little raspy, that's the case. Either that or it's just you think it's some sound filter on our recording device. Also,
this call will cost you $3.99 per minute, listeners.
Hey, girl. So yeah. All kidding aside, though, Jillian, I know you have been going through a very difficult time dealing with some health issues, and I think a lot of us in recovery, when you get sober, mm-hmm. and whether that be sobriety emotionally or from people, or sobriety from drugs, alcohol, whatever, mm-hmm. It forces us to live in the reality of the moment, to live in conscious awareness of everything around us, and that can be a friend or a foe depending on what feelings we're going through. But I know you've been through a bit of a health crisis. I've been through a couple of things since I got sober, several things that I'll talk about later, but we've all dealt with some sort of health issue. Somebody figures out they have either a major or a minor health issue, or they need some kind of surgery, or even having your wisdom teeth out. I've had that happen. I've had my wisdom teeth removed in sobriety. But it can be scary. It can be challenging. It can cause us to lose a lot of emotional sobriety.
Yeah.
And some people might drink, use drugs, or try to find some sort of escape from their life because of the stress and anxiety. So I guess first I would ask you, Jillian, if you're willing to share a little bit about what is going on with you in recent times.
Sure. Thanks, Dom. Well, and I mean, this is very new for me because up until this past year, I've been a very healthy person, physically healthy mostly. So a lot of my health stuff in recovery has been focused on my mental health state, the anxiety and obsession, and all the things that have gone along with being in codependent, co-addicted, dysfunctional relationships. But currently, so this is for those listeners who have uteruses.
I don't qualify for that.
Some of you will be able to relate to this. So, I'm at an age where women go through this transformation, this transition time known as menopause, and it's something. I've been insulated from some of this stuff, like the hot flashes and for the most part, like anxiety, some of the night sweats, all that stuff. But what has happened is I've developed this growth that's typically it's a very common and almost always benign growth. But I've been going through some stuff over the last year. I've had more medical appointments in the last year than I have since I was pregnant. Otherwise, it's like, go in, have my annual physical, and since my 40s, and there's the bonus of the mammogram. But otherwise, I just, no worries. But I had this swelling in my abdomen I noticed last, fall of 2021. And I mentioned it to my nurse practitioner. And I'm like, it doesn't hurt. But I've noticed my stomach's like a little more distended. I'm also approaching 50, hadn't been as active in the last couple of years. So I'm like, maybe it's just that. I'm like, but I have the sensation of like a swollen organ. Can't figure out what it is. So he kind of felt around and we were like, So at the following annual physical this past summer, I mentioned like this, so this sensation is still there, and like I can feel this thing. Like when I noticed it when I was doing some yoga, like some YouTube yoga in the morning, and so he sent me for an abdominal ultrasound, and so my results came back like it's normal, except it picked up a mass in your uterus. I don't remember how anxious that made me at the time, but I'm sure it made me somewhat anxious because it wasn't supposed to be there. So follow-up ultrasound a few weeks later revealed they're called fibroids. So a 10 centimeter fibroid. So
I've heard of those.
Yeah.
What is a fibroid? Is it just a growth of some kind?
It's a growth. It's almost like almost kind of like muscle tissue, but I believe so. I've done a lot of reading on these and on menopause. There's a couple forums on Reddit that I follow, menopause and hysterectomy, and I'm just like, younger me never would have envisioned me here, but it's a really great kind of like recovery. It's mostly a very supportive, reassuring, comforting community of other people going through the same stuff, or
Sure.
to varying degrees, and they share their experience, strength, and hope, for lack of a better term. But that's what it's been like. And mostly it's been something to help ease my mind as I'm mentally trying to wrap my head around a major surgery, because I've never had a major surgery. So a hysterectomy, even though it's very routine, and there's a 99% chance that I'll survive, because of course I started Googling all the how likely are you to die from a hysterectomy, because I have a propensity to catastrophize. But yeah, so it's a very routine procedure, and odds are I'm going to feel amazing, because 99.9% of testimonies that I read either online or from people I know in person are like, oh my gosh, best things ever happened to me. I wish I would have done it years ago. I feel 10 years younger, all good things.
Right.
So I'd been kind of using, that to kind of help educate myself. So yeah, fibroids, they're caused by surges in estrogen, which happen a lot as you're getting into menopause phase. It's like the last hurrah for your hormones, I guess. So for whatever reason, I grew this growth that's not supposed to be there. And the second doctor I went to for a second opinion, when the first doctor told me in early July after my ultrasound that found this, I went in wanting to talk about alternatives to surgery, and she wasn't very receptive. And when I asked her recommendation, she was like, hysterectomy. And I walked out of there in tears because I just wasn't prepared for that. So I had a follow-up ultrasound on Halloween, and it didn't reveal, it hadn't changed. This growth hadn't changed. So that same doctor.
That's usually a good sign.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, this is a good thing. It's not growing. It's remaining stable in size. So she's like, you don't have to have a hysterectomy. I'm like, good. So I wanted to try an alternate procedure called an embolization, which, so in between that, sorry, I did see a second doctor because I wanted a second opinion on hysterectomy. They both were like, yep, hysterectomy. Also, we're going to have to cut you open because your uterus is too large. The second doctor told me that my uterus was the size of a 20-week pregnant uterus. So effectively, I was halfway through pregnancy, but there's no baby. So I'm like, I'm going to give myself a little grace for my tummy popping out a bit, because no wonder. And that it turns out, the discovery of this growth explained the anemia that I had in the fall of 2021. I had to get iron infusions because I was so anemic, and these fibroids can cause more blood loss for women. And so, yeah. So
you're going through this major health crisis.
Yeah.
And talk to me about your mood and your emotional sobriety at that point, like during the different points, of course, stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, any visit to the doctor where abnormal results come back is going to cause people stress.
Yes.
But kind of describe where your head was at, aside from the actual facts of the medical condition. But where were you at?
Well, when I thought it was a fibroid, I was just like, okay, because I'd done my research. I'm like, oh, this is just it's an inconvenience. But, I didn't feel very anxious. I was just like, my daughter's like, if it's me, I just want to get it out of there. But I was so nervous about going under in general anesthesia and surgery. Like, that's where my anxiety was.
Why do you think that is?
Well, so this is what I can tell you. And this came up early on. So when my brother died, in June of 2021, end of June, I had this, right after that, I had this terrible fear, like, oh my gosh, what if I die young too and my dad loses both of his kids? And so that popped up again when I was told I had to have surgery, because I'm like, but what if I'm that 1%? What if I'm what if I'm that special case and something goes horrifically wrong and my dad loses his other child?
So you catastrophized into a trauma situation.
Yeah.
That I would imagine that's not uncommon amongst people in recovery. I catastrophize things I don't know what it is. We may do a whole separate episode on, catastrophizing.
I bet we could.
Because, you can catastrophize about anything.
Yes.
It could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be, for some reason, the human brain goes to the negative.
Yeah.
It's like, and we're so used to hearing this, in office situations even. What's the worst case scenario?
Yes.
What's the worst case scenario?
Well, let me consult my brain because it's an expert.
Because we're all good at worst case scenario. Nobody ever says, give me the best case scenario here.
Right. Well, and that's a huge part of why I restrict my consumption of news, because oh my gosh, I don't need any help catastrophizing. So yeah, I'm like, let's just limit the consumption of the news. But yeah, so I think that was with the surgery, that was my initial anxiety. And then when I was referred to, when the second time I met with the doctor who initially told me to, I should recommend a hysterectomy, when she was receptive to this embolization alternative procedure, I was referred to a radiology doctor, and he recommended an MRI. Just to be extra sure that this, in fact, was benign. I had zero worries going into the MRI. I'm like, okay, it's just going to show that I have, this fibroid that we know is like 10 centimeters or whatever. So I go for the MRI on December 27th, right between Christmas and New Year's, like right between two major holidays. Unlike when I had my ultrasounds, I get the test results. I get a notification of a new test result, but there's no comment from a doctor. It's just me interpreting this result, and as I'm reading, I see the word carcinoma.
Don't tell me you used a search engine to start looking something up.
After that I did, yeah. So I'm like,
so your new doctor was
Dr. Google.
Dr. Google.
Dr. Google's the worst.
I'm guilty of that too, so don't think I'm just picking on you. I'm guilty of using Dr. Google, and it always comes up to, I might have a sniffle and, I'm going to die of cancer.
I have a hangnail and I'm going to die. Yeah, just follow
a little pain in my stomach, I must have cancer and I'm going to die.
I just feel like that's always a possible outcome whenever you Google anything about your health. So I did learn through this process, like, not Googling was the smart thing to do. But I read this result, and so when I had to, I immediately felt like I had tunnel vision. I felt nauseous, felt like I was going to pass out. And then I'm like, oh my gosh.
So you had a panic attack.
A small panic attack, I suppose. Yeah. It was a very unsettling experience.
Nausea and ready to pass out. I'd say that's a pretty good panic attack.
Does that qualify?
Yeah. If you actually passed out, it would have been a massive panic attack. But you had a panic attack.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was awful. Well, and then what went through my mind is, oh my gosh. So my mom is adopted, and her biological mother died of cancer, is what I was told when I was young. Now, my mom is not a reliable source of information because of her significant mental illness, and I think she's also getting dementia. So not a reliable source of info, but when I was younger, I was told her mom died of cancer, but I heard either cervical, uterine, or stomach, so I don't know for sure. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. This is my fault. I should have said something sooner. I never told my doctor that my grandma may have had uterine cancer, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm just, yeah. So but then I had to pause and breathe and reread what it said was features concerning for hyperplasia / carcinoma. So hyperplasia is like an overgrowth of cells. It's not cancerous, but something to watch. So it didn't say, Jillian, you have cancer, but that's what my brain interpreted.
So how did you deal with, what tools did you use to deal with the anxiety issues? So
I checked in with my sponsor, like I always do. God bless her. She's so sweet. Checked in with friends, and that's kind of my go-to. And then just like reminding myself, I'm like, okay, this is, and my daughter's like, this isn't definitive. It's saying, they're going to follow up, right? So they recommended a biopsy. And then when I can access my rational brain, it was hard because my amygdala was on fire at the time because I'm in fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, so this is them doing their due diligence. And it feels really freaking scary, but this is truly them ensuring I get the best possible outcome and the best health care.
Sure.
Like that. But my scared self is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die young and my dad's going to lose his other child, and oh, my brain. When you are okay.
Don't think you're the only one.
I know
okay?
I'm not.
As we say in recovery, don't think you're unique.
Terminal uniqueness.
Because, I had some blood work done at the end of last year. I always get blood work done. I try to do it a couple of times a year just to check my levels, and all that, because they can do amazing things with just some blood samples these days. So, I get some blood work, and there's a couple of numbers that are not quite in the normal range. And, of course, I am thinking I better get my affairs in order.
Right.
I had like a low iron level, and I better get my affairs in order. I just catastrophize. And then I start looking up the different combinations because, Dr. Google is out there, and I'm looking up these different, what if it's high, what if it's low, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And of course, the worst case scenario is what pops up, and you start reading about that, and it's like, oh, okay, I probably have 7 minutes to live.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, I definitely was picturing, people doing my eulogy. Like, it's so ridiculous how I can.
Oh my gosh, you went off the rails.
I did, and I think that was after the MRI. I don't know. So here's the thing: when you are an overthinker and have way too much time alone, that is a terrible combination.
Really,
especially when you're facing potentially concerning health issues. So I had way too much time. I do. I have a lot of time alone, and when I'm in a good space, like it's nice. It's solitude, but it was very scary and isolating, and just And then this is how my brain works. So I'm like, okay, so I haven't met with the doctor yet. MRI results, possible scary language, definitely. Well, scary for me because I don't know what it means exactly. I just see a word that says carcinoma, freaks me out. And then I'm like...
I hear that, by the way, from my skin doctor, but there are normal carcinomas. There's, it's like... I hear these words that are scary cancer words.
Yes.
When I go to the skin doctor to get checked out.
Yeah.
And then I immediately, whoa, that doesn't sound good. What's going on? You're going to have to cut the arm off or what? Because I could catastrophize.
Right?
I catastrophize right on the spot, All right, we're going to have to take the arm.
Oh my gosh.
For one little birthmark.
You have a funny-looking freckle.
You got a funny-looking freckle.
We're going to amputate your arm.
Exactly. So... a lot of these words, it's just the medical term for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad, or that it could be benign, or it could be, removable, or it might just be nothing.
Well, that's the thing. Like, telling my brain, like, this could just as easily be nothing, but no, my brain. And so I'm like, well, this is what I get for, making it clear to the universe that I'm probably just going to be single forever, and my kids are grown, and I'm just kind of like at this space right now where I'm like, I don't feel like don't have much purpose, and I'm not really doing anything meaningful with my life, so probably just a good time to take me out. Like, that's the crap that was going through my head, and I'm like, in my friend, people are like, you did not manifest this. Like, I'm just going to manifest some, like, terrible cancer because, like, what? But I had to talk myself down, but I didn't just because, my brain is the problem. I can't find the solution within my anxious brain. So I, was wise enough to reach out to others, and to get support, and just to remember, so I go from the MRI to a biopsy. And that, thankfully, so when I get the notification of results, my sweet coworker, I'm like, can you come with me while I read this? Because I just was nervous. And so I'm like peeking through one eye at the screen, and I see negative for cancer. I'm like, oh, so relieved. Okay, all is well, yay. But I'm like, I'm definitely getting a hysterectomy now. Like, I'm convinced that this uterus just has to go, and before it goes rogue on me. So I have my biopsy. I'm all good. And then, so that was a Tuesday. I get my results. I'm like relaxed. Following Monday, I get a call from the doctor who originally recommended hysterectomy. And she calls to say, hey, I just, even though your biopsy was normal, I'm referring you to this other surgeon who specializes in oncology. And I'm like, okay. And so, again, I'm just like, oh, boy, my anxiety spikes. I'm feeling nauseous. I'm feeling like I'm going to pass out. I'm just like, oh, my gosh. And then she mentions my second ultrasound, like the MRI, obviously, that was the thing that triggered, like, that language was concerning. But she's like, well, your second ultrasound. I'm like, what do you mean my second ultrasound? Like, I met with her after my second ultrasound. She had no concerns. Like, why? And so I was vacillating between anxiety and anger for a few weeks, like, mad at myself. Like, I should have said something sooner to my doctor. I should have pushed for an ultrasound. And
do you think maybe that you had some control issues?
What? No. Codependents have control issues.
Spiraling out of control because there are things that you can't control.
Yeah.
And that's what sets us off. And then we catastrophize when we can't control it, because if we can't control it, it's not going to go well.
Right.
That's what we do to ourselves. If we can control this, everything will be just fine, and, we'll be good.
Right.
But if I can't control this, it's obviously going to kill me.
Right.
So.
Well. And it's, I've dealt with plenty of things that I can't control in recovery. This was the first time I was powerless over my body, or felt powerless over what was going on with my body. So that's a whole new level.
I get it.
Yeah.
I went through something with my back.
Yeah.
I had some severe back issues. As you get older, a lot of people have degenerative disc disease.
Yes.
So that's quite common. So I knew about that. But
so how did that? I mean, so you'd already had been sober for a bit at that point?
Oh yeah, I've been sober for years.
When you dealt with the disc issue.
And then I had some severe pain kicking in. My back would go out, at the weirdest times. And when I say my back would go out, it doesn't mean I had a back ache. It means I can't walk.
Yes.
I'm down on my knees with tears coming out of my eyes. That's, painful stabbing pain.
Yes.
So I'm like, I've got to go to the doctor. So we went, and I said, Doc, we've really got to take a closer look at this. Something's going on, because I've had back pain off and on for years. And of course, the first conversation is, because a lot of people who are addicted to stuff will go and say they have a backache and try to get pain meds
or something. Yeah.
So and I'm like, no, one thing I can tell you is I tell my doctors that I'm a person in long-term recovery. I have that conversation.
Good for
Any
you.
doctor that I'm dealing with knows that I'm a person in long-term recovery. So we get that on the table, and that's my experience. Is good for them to know that.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that way, if you have to discuss points that involve medications and whatnot, you can come up with a plan. But anyway, I'm dealing with this back, and it was really bad. So they send me to physical therapy, and that helps for a little bit. But then, we come back, and it's, and this is condensing periods of time down.
Yeah.
So I'm like, major pain. This is not going away. What am I going to do? Go back to the doctor. All right, we've done the X-rays. Now we're gonna do an MRI. And
those are not fun.
I liked an MRI.
What?
I lay down, take a nap, and it's over.
Did they put you out?
No, I just go to sleep in the tube.
My claustrophobia was like...
It's
oof.
like, picture yourself at your body being pushed through a toilet paper tube. You're just a little tiny figurine, and you're going into the toilet paper tube or the paper towel tube.
There's nothing comforting about that for me.
I'm not claustrophobic. I just close my eyes, and it's like, the biggest thing is when you're just dozing off in the thing, it starts making noise like, bang, bang, bang.
Yes.
Come on, let me take my nap. But anyway, I come back out after the MRI, and here's where it gets scary. The doc looks at it and sees a mass on a little mass on my back. So I went through the same thing. I'm catastrophizing. I've got cancer now.
Right.
My back has got cancer, and I'm going to die. This is it. But I did not go into panic attack mode. I mean, it was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look in another few months and see if this growth is getting bigger, or if it's moving, or if there's anything going on with it. And in the meantime, we're going to do some more physical therapy with you and try to get you loosened up so you can move around, because you got to be able to move around in the world. And back pain is very debilitating.
Yes.
Mentally, physically, etc. So, I mean, I did that, and 6 months went by. I had to go back and get another MRI done because they want to follow up and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to deal with 6 months of trying to just keep myself in shape and not think about this growth or whatever, this abnormal thing in my back.
Yeah.
But I didn't come unglued. I'm kind of shocked, actually. I really held it together. I thought about it, and of course, I was looking things up online and whatnot, doing research, but I was just believing that I was going to be fine.
Huh.
I lived under the belief that the God of my understanding brought me this far. He's not going to drop me. My time's not over yet.
Right.
So I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the plane is going down, but my seat's landing safely. That's kind of like the pilot comes on and says the plane's crashing, brace for impact, but my seat's landing safely. I don't care. I'm protected. That's just the attitude I have.
Good for you.
So I get the results back, and it's like the mass has remained exactly the same. It's benign. We don't need to do anything. And it was in a place that they really couldn't operate to take a sample or anything.
Yeah.
So they just wanted to look at it.
Sure.
And through changes in my behavior and exercise regime and so forth and so on, bringing it forward to today, my back is a lot better. My brain is clear of this fear of dying.
Yeah.
At least from that.
Right.
but I mean, I went through it, and it's just using the tools of recovery and believing that I was protected by my higher power. It got me through it.
Right.
And if I was going to go, then I was going to go happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have to. Yeah. So I'd like that you mentioned the solution, right? And I think for me, a lot of it was still part of like the grief response with my brother. Like I feel like if my brother hadn't have just died not all that long ago, that I wouldn't have been as acute with my fear. But I did find from like July till October when I got a new ultrasound, like I had no concerns that there was anything like I'm like, this is just a fibroid. But I think that's why. And I did tell myself, I'm like, okay, so what are we doing? Like, what have we learned in our program? Like one day at a time, right? And I would tell myself after the biopsy or between the biopsy result and going to see the oncologist, like I don't have a diagnosis today. I don't have a scary diagnosis today. Today is a good day. I feel good. I feel healthy. And I really believed, like even going into my biopsy, I had a dream the night before that I got my results and I was fine. And I also had a dream my grandma visited me in my dream, which that's a completely separate topic. But I really believe that my guardian angels, some of them are loved ones that have passed before me. And I think she was just checking in on me because she knew I was kind of nervous. But I definitely like, okay, let's stay present. And today I'm like, you know what? And then when my brain would go to a really dark place, I'm like, well, my daughter's stepmom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and she's still kicking a year later. So I've got at least a year. I'm like, what?
Right.
But I'm like, no matter the outcome, I'm like, I am going to make the most of the time that I have. I really don't believe that.
Don't you think we should do that anyway?
Yes.
We should make the most of the time we have, whether we've got a week, a month, or
20 years, 30 years.
30
yes.
years.
Agreed. And it's easier to do that when I have a program, when I have people I can check in with, and I'm like, and I have a therapist. So that's another thing. I happen to have a therapy appointment scheduled the same day I had that call from the doctor that I was being referred to the oncologist, which was perfectly timed. And, and so we talked through, like, she's like, what would you say to your anxiety? I'm like, that's such a therapist question. But, just kind of like acknowledging that and then kind of saying to it, like, it's a part of yourself. I'm like, okay, we're doing, I'm going to take care of us. We're going to the doctor. We're doing follow-up. We're doing everything we can. I did the Serenity Prayer ran through my head a lot during that time. I'm like, you know what? I'm powerless, obviously, over like what's going on to a degree. Like I can't help that I've had this mass, but I'm doing everything I can to follow up on it and get medical treatment. So it's not like I'm ignoring it. I'm not avoiding it. But what I found, because I had such bad anxiety that week after I got the call about the referral, I ended up, and you know this, Dom, and I don't know if our listeners do, like the concept of a higher power has been nebulous for me in recovery because I didn't grow up with a very concrete concept of that. I grew up in an agnostic, irreligious family. But I have a good friend who has a very, very strong faith in Jesus. And he's just, And I admire so much like the deep sense of peace. So we text daily, and I was checking with him a lot during that time. And I'm like, man, I want that for myself. Like, I want that sense of peace that I'm okay, I'm protected no matter what happens. And what worked for me after a few nights of like almost no sleep is talking to God, like the more traditional version, like, that my friend's version of God, that worked for me. And I would talk to God out loud, and I would just kind of repeat these, like, thank you for your love and protection. Thank you for my health. Thank you for the people you've placed in my life. Thank you for, and a gratitude practice really helps me a lot with not catastrophizing, and just really staying focused and having the perspective of, well, today, right now in this moment, I'm healthy, I'm good, I feel safe, I feel, I'm well loved, I'm surrounded with support. That got me through the next week.
So would you say, or is it safe to say, based on our experiences and what I've witnessed with countless others, is that, number one, your mental state can determine your physical health in some cases, quite often actually, because people who were scheduled to die that lived another 5 years or whatever, or whatever the case may be, your mental state plays an important role in your health. Yes. And if you're not in a good mental state, you can drive your health right into the ground. Right. The other thing is that and I'm going to throw a concept out here for all of the naysayers when it comes to God. Yeah. And that is, maybe God was just trying to teach us. Yeah. Maybe God was just trying to teach us how to use our brains better to create that positive mental state that makes us well, to use the power, that higher power, to use that power that is also found within us and around us. Yes. To make that work in our favor. Yeah. And people want to argue about it. People spend more time arguing about what building we're going to go meet God at, and what we're going to talk about with God today, and and what songs we're going to sing around God today, and and how much money we need for God today, and instead of just using the power and teachings of what he, she, it has provided for us. This power is available to us. Yes. Yes. So you're in a good mental state. I was in a good mental state, and here we are, still going. Yeah. And I think I shared with you too, because we texted during this time, that I rewatched this documentary. This is not an endorsement, but it was called Heal, and it's just about because I watched it maybe a couple of years ago, but in this acute phase of like feeling anxious about my health, I rewatched it, and it talks about the power of the mind to heal the body. And so that helped me too. Like, I was utilizing any sort of thing I could to help me get into a space of not feeling anxious and not worrying, and really focusing on the outcome I wanted, not what I didn't want. So I kept picturing myself healthy, and now I've got a surgery date now after meeting with that oncology doctor who, by the way, it was a really encouraging appointment. Now, when I started the appointment, my blood pressure was through the roof. Like, it's always been normal, but my biopsy appointment and that appointment, my blood pressure was just sky high for me. But the doctor, said to me, like, there's a 1 in 2,000 chance that this mass could be cancerous. And it sounded like, even if it wasn't, like, she wasn't worried that we couldn't treat it. Like, she didn't do a follow-up biopsy, which I anticipated. My best friend, God bless her, was there for me as my emotional support person. And she reminded me that the doctor said, like, your lymph nodes are fine. So this doctor did not seem, this specialist, this expert in the field, did not seem concerned about my state of health. So why should I, I should trust that, right? I trust my higher power, God of my understanding. I trust this healthcare professional. Well, that situation can go one of two ways. I mean, a person can accept that and do what you just said. They can say, if they don't think so, I don't think so. Or people can fight it and say, either way, you're right. It's like you can make yourself right either way, because your mental state, a person's mental state can go downhill because they believe they're sick. So therefore, they're sick all the time. A lot of times they'll call people like that hypochondriacs, because every time they turn around, they're sick with something. Yeah, or health anxiety. Yeah. And with her, well, I'm like, I trust, but I'm still getting the procedure. But it gave me comfort
I'm going to have. Like I trust God, but I also trust medical. So I'm working with both of them.
Now that makes sense. That's yeah. We wouldn't tell anybody to just think yourself well,
right.
When you need surgery.
Yes.
But that don't be foolish.
Yeah.
God even says don't be a fool.
Right.
So you don't want to be a fool. You want to use all, not just some, all of the tools that are available.
Exactly.
All the tools and a positive attitude. You want a positive attitude for your doctor? Do you want your doctor to think you're going to die? Because if your doctor thinks you're going to die and goes in and does surgery,
right?
Well, that's not. Nobody's going into the Super Bowl saying, I'm going in to lose.
Right. And that is one thing I said to my friend going into it. She's like, what do you need from me? I'm like, if they start talking about something scary, I'm like, I want to focus on what we're going to do to treat it. I don't want to hear, like this documentary talks about, like, hear the diagnosis, but don't focus on the prognosis. Because I remember you sharing in a former podcast, Dom, about, I think it was Tony Robbins telling a story about maybe it was his father-in-law or something who was diagnosed with cancer, but he's like, don't tell him he has cancer, because once this person had that thought in their head, once that seed was planted. So I'm like, I don't want to talk about like anything limiting.
This guy went for like 10 years.
Yes.
When he was supposed to have 6 months to live, 8 months to live. He went 10 years.
Yes.
And somebody told him at the doctor's office, I can't believe you're alive. You shouldn't be here. You should be dead. And he died within a year. And it's like, you are what you absorb, and if you absorb all that negativity, you're going to be negative.
And what you believe too. I mean, I really believe in that. So I'm saying that my higher power, and having an open mind about my higher power and letting it evolve, like that helped me in this time. And for you, I'm so grateful to hear that you managed to not catastrophize and go into downward spiral when you were dealing with your back issues, and that you were, well enough into your recovery that you were able to tap into the tools and the resources to maintain, and I think, focusing on the outcome that we want, at least for me, that has helped a lot. So now that my surgery is scheduled, I'm picturing myself recovering, and now I'm picturing all the wonderful things I'm going to do and the adventures I'm going to have when I'm recovered, and how much better my life is going to be.
So I think, based on all of that, we need to do an episode on catastrophizing, because there's so many areas of life. It's not just, today was about health.
Yes.
But we could just do an episode on catastrophizing. You could talk about it with relationships, job, even taking a trip. Assuming the worst. Oh
my gosh, I've so done that.
we always just assume the worst and take for granted the good stuff that has happened, and I think we could help a lot of people if we went through some power of positive thinking and get rid of the catastrophe and turn it into a positive outcome. And look, you're going to be healthy. You're going to have a long, healthy life. I never stopped believing that you were going to have a long, healthy life, even when you were having your anxiety attack. Yeah. I just believed you're going to be fine. You've got a good team of doctors working with you, and you're going to be fine. Yeah. Just like I believed that I was getting the best care I could, and if they had to go in and cut this thing out of my back and whatever, that I was going to be fine. Not once, Jillian, did I take pause and think, I'm never going to be able to walk again. They're possibly going to do back surgery. Right. I never even thought of that. Good. I did think of dying. Thank you for admitting that. I mean, the thought crossed my mind, but back surgery, good heavens, that could be, I'll never walk again. Sure. Which in some cases might be a fate worse than death. To be, in a situation where when you have something and have it taken away from you. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, our time is running tight here, but I think we're going to have some incredible show notes for our audience based on this and some resources. I would have a feeling, because there's a lot of power in positivity and, looking at the different health stuff that shows that the mind can help heal us. I mean, I'm sure you'll find some good stuff, Jillian. I will do what I can. Yes. So thanks for sharing a very personal and what could be a difficult subject, but I have a feeling for any of us that have health issues, and I mean, if you live long enough, you're going to have a health issue.
Exactly.
But especially I have a lot of female friends, especially for women going through, menopause and maybe finding out that there's a problem with some of the systems in there, can be very scary and challenging. I suppose, it's a little easier if you're older and you've already got your family, as opposed to I've known young people who've gone through it, and it can be very terrifying when you haven't had an opportunity to have a family yet and you've got something like that going on.
I mean, my uterus has been in retirement for a while. So for me, it makes sense. It was just getting beyond the anxiety of the surgery, and now there's this term that I've embraced called yeeting the uterus.
Okay.
That's what they talk about on the forum. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, it's. But yes, there are women that are much younger than me that are facing this, and that's a much scarier prospect. So yeah, I mean, thank you for allowing me to share. I don't know if that the actual procedure, but I hope that that listeners will hear something that resonates, that if they're facing something with their health and the solution for how to deal with that, like connecting with a higher power, focus on the outcome you want. Don't let fear and anxiety. So what I said to myself had a few mantras, but don't let tomorrow's worries steal today's serenity. And this is scary, but it's survivable.
Absolutely.
And several mantras, but yeah, I would encourage folks to you're doing what you can to take care of yourself, and just trust that. Trust your medical professionals, trust your higher power, and reach out for support. Please don't isolate, because it was tempting for me to kind of withdraw too. So I had to fight that urge and really reach out and connect for support.
Yeah, recovery is not a linear path. Recovery is not linear. It ebbs and flows, and what we need to do is stay plugged into whatever recovery program works, so that when crisis situations, when problems occur, we've got tools. We've got tools to use.
Yes.
So, Jillian, thanks for being on the show with me.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And do us a favor and please share the podcast with friends so that we can continue to grow our audience.
Yes.
We're currently international, and, we'd like to spread the word throughout. So thanks. Please share on social media.
Yeah. Wishing you all good health.
Take care until next time on the Recovery Rebirth Podcast.